Have you ever wondered whether prison is supposed to punish people or transform them for generations? Most countries have answered that question in the same way. When someone breaks the law, they are locked behind concrete walls, separated from society, and expected to pay for their mistakes through years of confinement. Yet, despite billions of dollars spent on prison systems around the world, many former inmates leave prison only to return again. The cycle repeats, communities suffer, and taxpayers continue to carry the burden. But what if there were another way? What if a prison could become a place where offenders learn useful skills, produce food, contribute to society, and prepare for a productive future? This question is at the center of a growing debate in Burkina Faso under the leadership of Captain IbrahimTraore. While some critics argue that prison labor is nothing more than exploitation, supporters believe it offers a practical path toward rehabilitation, national development, and self-reliance. Today, we will compare three very different approaches to incarceration. We will examine the controversial prison labor system in the United States, the highly praised rehabilitation model of Norway, and the emerging approach of Burkina Faso. Each system reflects a different vision of justice, responsibility, and human potential. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy thoughtful discussions about Africa's future and the bold ideas reshaping the continent. To understand why this debate matters, we must first ask a simple question. What is the real purpose of prison? Is it revenge, punishment, deterrence, rehabilitation, or perhaps a combination of all four? Throughout history, societies have struggled to find the right balance. The answer to that question may determine whether a prisoner leaves prison as a greater threat to society or returns as a productive citizen. Captain IbrahimTraore believes that prison should not be a warehouse for human beings. In his view, every citizen, even one who has broken the law, still possesses value that can contribute to national development. This philosophy has become one of the most discussed aspects of Burkina Faso's evolving correctional system. Rather than allowing inmates to spend years sitting behind walls with little purpose, the government has begun promoting a model that connects incarceration with production, vocational training, and economic participation. One of the most visible examples is the Baporo Agricultural Prison Project. Instead of being confined to traditional prison environments, inmates participate in farming activities that support food production while also learning practical skills. Supporters of the program argue that this approach addresses several national challenges at once. Burkina Faso, like many developing nations, faces pressure to improve food security, expand agricultural output, and create opportunities for citizens to earn a living. According to this perspective, allowing inmates to learn farming techniques, livestock management, and other productive skills serves both the individual and the country. The idea also aligns with Traore's broader vision of national self-reliance. He has frequently emphasized the importance of reducing dependence on foreign assistance and strengthening domestic production. In that context, prison reform becomes more than a justice issue. It becomes part of a larger economic strategy. Under this model, incarceration is intended to include responsibility and contribution. The offender does not simply wait for a release date. Instead, he participates in activities that can create value, while developing abilities that may help him build a different future once his sentence is complete. Supporters believe this is where the true strength of the system lies. They argue that a prisoner who spends years learning practical skills may leave with a better chance of supporting a family, finding work, and avoiding the mistakes that led to prison in the first place. For many Africans, that possibility is exactly what makes the Burkina Faso model appealing. Across the continent, governments face a difficult reality. They must fund prisons, create jobs, improve food security, and support economic development, often with limited financial resources. Every budget decision involves trade-offs. Supporters of Traore's approach argue that prison systems should not become permanent financial burdens. If inmates can learn productive skills while contributing to agriculture and national development, the correctional system may create value instead of simply consuming public funds. This argument became even more powerful after global supply disruptions exposed the vulnerability of food-importing nations. The effects of the pandemic, followed by the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, highlighted how dependent many countries had become on foreign grain supplies. Rising food prices affected millions of households across Africa. In response, many governments began discussing food sovereignty and agricultural self-sufficiency. Burkina Faso's prison labor model fits directly into that broader conversation. Supporters see it as a practical way to increase domestic production while helping offenders develop useful experience. Yet the discussion does not end there. Critics often ask whether economic benefits alone can justify prison labor. They argue that the rights and dignity of inmates must remain protected, regardless of the potential gains. This debate becomes even more interesting when compared with the United States. While Burkina Faso presents prison labor as a tool for national development and rehabilitation, the American system has faced decades of criticism for a very different reason. There, opponents argue that prison labor often benefits institutions and private interests far more than the inmates themselves. The American prison labor debate cannot be understood without looking at history. After slavery was abolished, the 13th Amendment prohibited involuntary servitude, but it included an important exception. Forced labor could still be used as punishment for a crime. Over time, that exception became the foundation for prison labor programs across the country. Today, inmates in various states perform work ranging from maintenance and agriculture to manufacturing and public services. Supporters argue that these programs provide structure, work experience, and job skills. Critics, however, point to another reality. Many prisoners receive extremely low wages, and in some cases, refusing to work can lead to disciplinary consequences. Human rights advocates have long questioned whether such arrangements truly serve rehabilitation or primarily benefit institutions that gain access to the inexpensive labor. The debate becomes even more controversial when private prisons enter the discussion. Opponents argue that when incarceration and profit become connected, incentives can become distorted. This is where supporters of Burkina Faso's model draw a distinction. They argue that there is a meaningful difference between labor that primarily generates value for private companies and labor that contributes to public goals such as food production, infrastructure improvement, and vocational training. Whether one agrees with that argument or not, it highlights an important question: who ultimately benefits from prison labor? The inmate, the community, the government, or private interests? To explore another possible answer, we must turn to a country that approaches incarceration from a completely different direction. In Norway, the focus is not on production or punishment. Instead, the system is built around rehabilitation, dignity, and preparing offenders for life after prison. Norway is often described as having one of the most humane prison systems in the world. Facilities such as Halden Prison have attracted international attention because they look very different from the prisons most people imagine. Inmates have private rooms, access to education, vocational training, recreational activities, and close interaction with prison staff. The philosophy behind the system is simple. The punishment is the loss of freedom, not the loss of human dignity. Norwegian authorities believe that if inmates are treated with respect and given opportunities to improve themselves, they are more likely to become productive members of society after release. This approach has produced results that many countries admire. Norway consistently reports lower recidivism rates than many other nations. Supporters point to this as evidence that rehabilitation can work when governments invest heavily in education, counseling, and reintegration programs. However, the Norwegian model also raises difficult questions. Maintaining such facilities requires significant public spending. The annual cost per inmate is far higher than what most developing countries could realistically afford. Critics also argue that some prisons appear too comfortable, especially for individuals convicted of serious crimes. For families of victims, that concern can be deeply emotional. They may ask whether a person responsible for violence, murder, or other severe offenses should enjoy living conditions that exceed those available to many law-abiding citizens around the world. This tension between justice and rehabilitation remains at the heart of the debate. Norway prioritizes reintegration. Burkina Faso emphasizes productive contribution and national development. The United States continues to wrestle with the legacy and structure of prison labor. Each model reflects different social values, economic realities, and visions of what prison should accomplish. Despite the growing popularity of Burkina Faso's prison reform among supporters, the model has not escaped criticism. Some observers in Western countries argue that requiring inmates to work in agricultural projects risks crossing the line between rehabilitation and forced labor. They warn that any prison labor system must be carefully monitored to ensure that human rights and dignity remain protected. Others question whether prison systems should play a direct role in economic production at all. From their perspective, correctional institutions should focus primarily on education, counseling, and personal development rather than contributing to national economic goals. Supporters of Burkina Faso's approach respond that such criticisms often overlook the realities facing developing nations. Unlike wealthy countries with vast budgets, Burkina Faso must balance rehabilitation with economic necessity. They argue that productive work, vocational training, and skill development can provide inmates with practical opportunities that may reduce the likelihood of reoffending after release. Supporters also emphasize that the model should be judged by its outcomes. If former inmates leave prison with skills, discipline, and the ability to support themselves, then the system may be achieving something valuable for both the individual and society. Ultimately, the debate reveals a larger truth. There is no universal prison model that works equally well everywhere. Every country must find a balance between justice, rehabilitation, public safety, economic realities, and human dignity. The challenge is not simply deciding how to punish offenders. It is deciding how to help create a safer society once those offenders return to the outside world. As we reach the end of this discussion, one thing becomes clear. The debate surrounding prisons is not really about buildings, walls, or prison uniforms. It is about how societies choose to deal with failure, accountability, and the possibility of redemption. The United States, Norway, and Burkina Faso represent three very different answers to the same question. In the United States, prison labor remains one of the most controversial issues in the justice system, with critics arguing that economic interests sometimes overshadow rehabilitation. In Norway, the focus is on restoring dignity and preparing offenders to return to society, even if that approach comes with significant financial costs. Burkina Faso, meanwhile, is attempting to build a model rooted in productivity, vocational training, and national development. Whether one supports or opposes IbrahimTraore's approach, it is difficult to deny that it challenges conventional thinking. Instead of viewing inmates solely as a burden on the state, The model asks whether they can become part of the solution. Can offenders help produce food, learn practical skills, and contribute to their communities while serving their sentences? Can prison become a place where mistakes are corrected rather than merely punished? The answers remain the subject of intense debate. Yet the conversation itself may be just as important as the outcome. Across Africa and beyond, governments are searching for ways to reduce crime, lower recidivism, strengthen economies, and create safer societies. What do you think? Should prisons focus on punishment, rehabilitation, or a balance of both? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring important issues shaping the future of Pan-African development, Burkina Faso, Africa New Leadership, Captain IbrahimTraore, the African Union, Pan-Africanism, and the vision of Ibrahim Traore. Be sure to subscribe and join us for future discussions. Under the hot African sun, a group of men walk slowly along a drainage canal with shovels and rakes in their hands. At first glance, they look like ordinary public workers carrying out a city cleanup campaign, but there is something unusual about them. These men are prisoners. Instead of remaining behind prison walls, they have been allowed to work in public spaces, cleaning drainage systems, planting trees, and helping improve their communities. In many countries, such a scene would be difficult to imagine. In Burkina Faso, however, it is becoming part of a new vision for justice and rehabilitation. The policy has attracted attention across Africa because it challenges a long-standing question. What is the true purpose of prison? Is it simply to punish those who have broken the law? Or should it also help them become better citizens under reforms supported by Captain IbrahimTraore's government? Burkina Faso is exploring a different answer. Rather than treating prisoners as a permanent burden on society, the country is giving selected inmates an opportunity to contribute to national development while preparing for life after release. Before examining why Burkina Faso trusts prisoners in ways many nations do not, it is important to understand the larger problem. Around the world, traditional prison systems often focus heavily on confinement and punishment, yet many former inmates struggle when they return to society. Without skills, confidence, or community support, some end up committing new crimes and returning to prison. This cycle raises an uncomfortable question. If a person leaves prison unchanged, has the system truly succeeded? Burkina Faso's experiment begins with a different belief. Real justice is not measured only by the number of people locked away. It is also measured by how many lives can be rebuilt and how many former offenders can become productive members of society again. Burkina Faso's approach becomes even more remarkable when we look at what prisoners are actually doing. These men are not performing symbolic tasks designed for publicity. They are taking part in projects that directly affect the daily lives of ordinary citizens. Across several cities, selected inmates have been assigned to clear blocked drainage canals, remove accumulated waste, plant trees, and improve public spaces that have suffered from years of neglect. One of the most visible challenges facing many urban areas in Burkina Faso is poor drainage. During the rainy season, plastic waste, sand, and debris often block water channels. When heavy rains arrive, entire neighborhoods can face flooding, damaged property, and increased health risks. Rather than allowing these problems to grow, authorities have mobilized prisoners with good conduct records to help restore these vital systems. Their work helps water flow properly, reduces environmental hazards, and improves living conditions for thousands of residents. The program extends beyond drainage maintenance. Prisoners also participate in tree planting campaigns designed to improve urban environments and support long-term environmental protection. These activities transform labor into something more meaningful than a prison assignment. Each tree planted and each canal cleared becomes visible proof that positive contributions can come from people who once made serious mistakes. What makes the initiative different from many prison labor programs around the world is that it is connected directly to community needs. The work is not hidden behind prison walls. Citizens can see the results with their own eyes. Streets become cleaner. Flood risks decrease. Public spaces improve. At the same time, prisoners gain a sense of purpose and responsibility that cannot be developed through confinement alone. Perhaps the most important detail is that participation is not automatic. Authorities do not simply release prisoners into the community. Only individuals who demonstrate good behavior and meet specific requirements are selected. This condition reinforces an important message. Opportunity must be earned. In Burkina Faso's model, rehabilitation begins when responsibility is demonstrated, not merely promised. The success of this program depends on a question that many governments hesitate to answer. Can society trust someone who has committed a crime? For many countries, the answer is often cautious or even negative. Burkina Faso has chosen a different path. Rather than assuming that every prisoner remains a threat, authorities believe that some individuals can earn trust through consistent good behavior and personal responsibility. This trust is not given freely. It is built on a process of evaluation and supervision. Prisoners selected for community work are chosen because they have demonstrated discipline, respect for prison rules, and a willingness to improve themselves. Their participation represents a reward for positive conduct rather than a right automatically granted to every inmate. This distinction is important because it shows that the program is based on accountability, not leniency. By linking trust to behavior, the government creates a powerful incentive. Prisoners understand that their actions have consequences, both positive and negative. Good conduct can open doors to opportunities, while poor conduct can close them. This approach encourages individuals to take responsibility for their choices and gives them a practical reason to pursue change. There is also an important psychological dimension. Many people who enter prison eventually come to believe that society has permanently rejected them. When individuals feel excluded, they often lose motivation to improve. Burkina Faso's program attempts to break this cycle by allowing selected prisoners to contribute to public projects. The government sends a clear message that rehabilitation is possible and that redemption is not merely an abstract concept. The community benefits as well. Citizens witness prisoners working to improve shared spaces rather than remaining isolated behind walls. This visibility helps challenge stereotypes and encourages a more balanced view of rehabilitation. The relationship between society and former offenders becomes less defined by fear and more defined by responsibility. In this model, trust is not a sign of weakness. It becomes a tool for transformation. The opportunity to serve the community gives prisoners something valuable to protect, creating a stronger motivation to change than punishment alone often achieves. One of the most striking aspects of Burkina Faso's prison reform is the incentive structure behind it. Under the program, prisoners who participate successfully in community service can receive significant sentence reductions. In practical terms, 1 month of approved labor can be exchanged for 3 months of reduced prison time. This policy has become one of the strongest motivations encouraging inmates to embrace rehabilitation rather than simply endure their sentences. The idea is based on a simple principle. People are often more likely to change when they can clearly see the benefits of their efforts. Traditional prison systems frequently rely on punishment alone. While punishment may discourage certain behaviors, it does not always inspire personal growth. Burkina Faso's approach adds another element: hope. Prisoners are given a realistic opportunity to improve their future through hard work and responsible conduct. This system changes the way inmates view their daily lives. Instead of counting the days until release, they can actively influence the length of their sentences. Every drainage canal cleaned, every tree planted, and every public space improved becomes part of a larger journey toward freedom. Labor is no longer seen merely as an obligation. It becomes an investment in a better future. The psychological effects can be significant. Many prisoners struggle with feelings of hopelessness and loss of control. By connecting effort to tangible rewards, the program restores a sense of personal agency. Participants begin to see themselves as individuals capable of shaping their destinies rather than passive subjects of a punishment system. There are practical benefits as well. Prison administrators gain a powerful tool for encouraging discipline and reducing misconduct. Inmates have a clear reason to maintain good behavior, follow rules, and participate constructively in rehabilitation programs. This creates a more positive environment both inside and outside prison facilities. Ultimately, the sentence reduction policy reflects a broader philosophy. Burkina Faso is attempting to replace a culture of passive punishment with a culture of earned opportunity. The message is clear: mistakes may have consequences, but genuine effort can also create a path forward. To understand why this reform exists, it is necessary to look beyond the prison system itself and examine the leadership philosophy behind it. The community service program did not emerge in isolation. It reflects a broader vision promoted by Captain IbrahimTraore, a vision centered on self-reliance, national responsibility, and the belief that every citizen can contribute to the development of Burkina Faso. Since coming to power, Ibrahim Traore has consistently emphasized the importance of mobilizing domestic resources rather than depending entirely on external solutions. His speeches often focus on the idea that national progress requires participation from all segments of society. Farmers contribute through agriculture. Soldiers contribute through national defense. Young people contribute through work and to innovation. Within this framework, even individuals who have committed crimes are not automatically considered lost causes. Instead, they may be viewed as people capable of contributing again if given the opportunity to reform. This perspective helps explain the government's willingness to experiment with prison rehabilitation. Rather than seeing inmates solely as a burden on public finances, the administration views them as potential contributors who can help solve real problems facing their communities. Drainage systems need cleaning. Public spaces require maintenance. Environmental restoration demands labor. By connecting rehabilitation with these needs, the government seeks to create benefits for both society and prisoners. The policy also reflects a shift in how justice is understood. In many systems, justice is measured primarily through punishment. In Burkina Faso's emerging approach, justice includes responsibility, service, and restoration. The goal is not simply to isolate offenders, but to encourage them to repair some of the damage caused by their actions through constructive work. For supporters of the reform, this represents more than a prison policy. It is part of a larger effort to strengthen national unity and reinforce the idea that citizenship involves duties as well as rights, whether one agrees with every aspect of the program or not. It clearly reflects a leadership philosophy that values transformation over permanent exclusion. Despite the praise it has received, Burkina Faso's prison labor program has not escaped criticism. Some observers, particularly in Western countries, question whether allowing prisoners to work outside correctional facilities creates risks related to security, human rights, and political image management. Critics argue that any program involving inmate labor must be carefully examined to ensure that participation is voluntary, conditions are fair, and benefits are distributed transparently. Others raise concerns about whether sentence reductions tied to labor could create pressure on prisoners to participate. Some human rights advocates worry that governments may present such programs as rehabilitation while using them primarily to achieve political goals or reduce public spending. These concerns are not unique to Burkina Faso. Similar debates have taken place in many countries whenever prison labor becomes part of public policy. However, supporters of the program offer a different perspective. They point out that the initiative focuses on prisoners with good conduct records who meet specific requirements. Participation is connected to rehabilitation, community service, and the possibility of earning reduced sentences through demonstrated responsibility. From this viewpoint, the program is less about punishment and more about creating opportunities for positive change. Supporters also emphasize the practical results. Communities benefit from cleaner streets, improved drainage systems, environmental restoration, and reduced flood risks. Prisoners gain work experience, renewed purpose, and a stronger connection to society. Instead of remaining idle behind prison walls, participants contribute to projects that improve everyday life for ordinary citizens. Perhaps the most important response to critics is that no rehabilitation system should be judged only by its intentions. It should also be judged by its outcomes. If a program helps reduce hopelessness, encourages responsibility, strengthens communities, and lowers the likelihood of future crime, many supporters believe it deserves serious consideration rather than immediate dismissal. The debate will likely continue. Yet Burkina Faso's experiment has already succeeded in raising an important question for the world. Should prison systems focus only on punishment, or should they also create meaningful pathways toward redemption and reintegration? Burkina Faso's decision to trust selected prisoners may appear unusual to many observers, but it reflects a larger belief about justice, responsibility, and human potential. Instead of viewing prison solely as a place of punishment, the country is testing the idea that rehabilitation should begin long before an inmate's release date. By allowing prisoners with good conduct records to serve their communities, authorities are creating opportunities for accountability, personal growth, and social reintegration. The results extend beyond cleaner streets and improved drainage systems. Every canal cleared and every tree planted represents something deeper. It represents a chance for individuals who once made mistakes to demonstrate that they are capable of making positive contributions. At the same time, communities are encouraged to see rehabilitation not as a theory, but as a visible process taking place before their eyes. The debate surrounding the program will undoubtedly continue. Some will focus on the risks, while others will emphasize the benefits. Yet, Burkina Faso has already introduced an important conversation that many nations avoid. What if the most effective prison system is not the one that imposes the harshest punishment, but the one that creates the greatest number of successful returns to society? For many African nations facing similar challenges, the experience offers valuable lessons. Rehabilitation requires opportunity. Responsibility grows when trust is earned. Reintegration works best when it begins before freedom is restored. These ideas resonate strongly with the broader vision of Pan-African development and self-determination. As Burkina Faso continues this experiment under the leadership of Captain IbrahimTraore and the broader aspirations associated with Ibrahim Traore, Pan-Africanism, and the future many supporters describe as an Africa new, the discussion will remain relevant across the continent. Whether viewed through the lens of the African Union, national development, or Pan-African cooperation. One question remains: Can societies become stronger by helping people rebuild their lives after failure? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to the channel for more stories about Burkina Faso, Africa, and the transformations shaping the continent's future. What if the greatest weapon against terrorism is not a rifle, a drone, or a military convoy? What if the most powerful defense of a nation begins inside a home, in the mind of a child, guided by the wisdom of a mother? This is the question that Burkina Faso is forcing many people across Africa to consider today. For years, Burkina Faso has faced one of the most difficult security crises on the African continent. Armed groups have attacked villages, displaced families, and disrupted the lives of millions. Like many countries facing such threats, the immediate response has often focused on military operations and security measures. Yet Ibrahim Traore and his supporters increasingly speak about something deeper. They argue that a nation cannot permanently defeat violence if it ignores the social conditions that allow violence to grow. According to this vision, the future of Burkina Faso will not be decided only by soldiers on the battlefield. It will also be decided by parents in their homes, teachers in classrooms, and especially mothers raising the next generation. The idea is simple but powerful. A child who grows up with education, discipline, hope, and a strong sense of identity is less likely to be attracted by extremist ideologies later in life. If you enjoy exploring the hidden forces shaping Africa's future, be sure to follow this channel and join us on this journey. History has shown that military victories alone do not always create lasting peace. Countries across different regions have defeated armed groups only to see new ones emerge years later. The reason is often the same. The weapons may disappear, but the poverty, hopelessness, and social instability that helped create the conflict remain. Burkina Faso is increasingly promoting the belief that true victory comes when society itself becomes stronger than the forces trying to divide it. A child may spend a few hours each day with teachers, neighbors, or friends, but for many years of life, no influence is stronger than that of a mother. Before a child learns about politics, religion, or society, that child learns values at home. The first lessons about responsibility, respect, discipline, and hard work often come from the person who raises them every day. This is why many experts believe that mothers are among the most important builders of national stability. When a mother has access to education, she is more likely to encourage her children to stay in school. When she has economic opportunities, she can help provide a more secure future for her family. When she understands the importance of critical thinking and community values, she becomes a powerful barrier against extremist influences. Across many regions affected by conflict, researchers have observed a similar pattern. Young people who feel abandoned, hopeless, or disconnected from society are often more vulnerable to recruitment by violent groups. These organizations frequently exploit frustration and poverty, offering a false sense of purpose and belonging. But when a child grows up in a stable home with guidance, support, and hope, the appeal of such messages becomes much weaker. For supporters of Burkina Faso's current direction, this reality carries an important lesson. The battle against terrorism does not begin when a soldier enters combat. It begins years earlier, when a child is learning what kind of person he or she will become. A nation that invests in mothers is investing in the character of its future citizens. This perspective does not place the entire responsibility on women. Fathers, schools, religious leaders, and communities all play important roles. However, the mother often remains the central figure during the most formative years of life. If Burkina Faso wants to build a generation capable of rejecting violence and embracing progress, many believe that empowering mothers is one of the smartest investments the country can make. If military operations represent the visible side of Burkina Faso's struggle for stability, cultural identity represents the less visible side. This is where many observers believe Ibrahim Traore is trying to build a foundation that will last beyond the current security crisis. Supporters of the government often argue that a nation cannot remain strong if its people lose confidence in their own values, traditions, and identity. In their view, national development is not only about roads, factories, or military equipment. It is also about creating citizens who understand who they are and what kind of future they want to build. This perspective helps explain why cultural issues sometimes receive significant attention in public debates. One example was the decision by authorities to prohibit the planned Miss Emerge 2025 event. According to official statements, the activity was considered inconsistent with the moral, social, and cultural values that the government seeks to promote. The decision generated discussion both inside and outside Burkina Faso. Supporters saw the move as part of a broader effort to encourage priorities such as education, professional development, social responsibility, and cultural pride. Critics viewed it differently, arguing that personal freedom should play a larger role in determining social activities, regardless of where one stands in that debate. The decision revealed an important aspect of the government's vision. The larger objective appears to be the creation of a society that is confident in its own identity, rather than one that simply imitates outside models. For Ibrahim Traore and many of his supporters, cultural sovereignty is closely connected to political and economic sovereignty. They believe that a population with strong roots and a clear sense of purpose is better prepared to resist division, manipulation, and instability. In that sense, the discussion is not only about a beauty competition, it is about the kind of citizens Burkina Faso hopes to raise and the values that future generations will inherit. Burkina Faso is not the first country to discover the importance of women in national development. Around the world, several nations have demonstrated that empowering women can strengthen families, improve education, reduce poverty, and create more stable societies. One of the most frequently cited examples is Rwanda. After the devastating genocide of 1994, the country faced the enormous challenge of rebuilding trust, institutions, and communities. Rwanda did not focus exclusively on security measures. It also increased opportunities for women to participate in politics, education, and economic development. Over time, women became central contributors to national reconstruction, helping create one of Africa's most stable and organized societies. Ghana offers another important lesson. While no country is free from challenges, Ghana has long been recognized as one of the more stable democracies in West Africa. Increased access to education for girls and greater participation of women in economic life have contributed to stronger communities and improved social resilience. When families become more economically secure, extremist groups often find it harder to recruit frustrated young people. Examples can also be found outside Africa. In Bangladesh, programs supporting women's education and entrepreneurship helped millions of families improve their living conditions. In Indonesia, community-based education initiatives involving mothers and local leaders have played a role in reducing the influence of extremist narratives in certain regions. These experiences share a common lesson. Long-term stability is not created solely by military victories. It is built through families, schools, and communities. Every child who remains in school, instead of dropping out, represents a small victory. Every mother who gains the skills to support her family contributes to national resilience. For supporters of Burkina Faso's current approach, these international examples reinforce a simple belief. Investing in women is not only a social policy, it is also an investment in security. stability, and the future strength of the nation. As Burkina Faso pursues its own path, not everyone agrees with the direction being taken. Some international observers, media organizations, and political commentators have criticized aspects of the government's approach, particularly when cultural policies become part of national development strategies. One common criticism is that restrictions on certain activities may reduce individual freedom. Critics argue that citizens should have broad authority to make personal choices about entertainment, fashion, and cultural participation. From this perspective, government involvement in cultural matters can appear excessive or unnecessary. However, supporters of Burkina Faso's approach respond with a different argument. They believe that every nation has the right to define the values it considers important for its future. Just as countries protect their borders and economic interests, they also have the right to protect cultural priorities that reflect their history and social realities. Another criticism suggests that cultural policies have little connection to security challenges. Opponents argue that terrorism is primarily a military problem requiring military solutions, yet supporters counter that this view overlooks the deeper causes of instability. Armed groups do not recruit people from a vacuum. They often target communities struggling with poverty, social fragmentation, weak education, and limited opportunities. From this perspective, strengthening families and promoting positive social values are not alternatives to security operations. They are complementary strategies. Soldiers may stop an attack today, but strong communities can help prevent future generations from being drawn into violence. Many people in Burkina Faso also reject the idea that foreign observers should determine the country's development priorities. They argue that African nations should be free to experiment with solutions rooted in their own cultures and experiences. Whether one agrees or disagrees with the government's methods, an important debate is taking place. The discussion is no longer only about how to defeat terrorists on the battlefield, it is also about how to build a society where terrorism finds fewer opportunities to grow in the first place. To understand why many supporters view Ibrahim Traore differently from traditional political leaders, it is important to look beyond current events and examine the broader vision that surrounds his leadership. For many Burkinabe citizens, the fight against terrorism is only one chapter in a much larger national transformation. Traore frequently speaks about sovereignty, self-reliance, production, education, and national dignity. His supporters argue that these ideas are connected. A country cannot be truly secure if it depends entirely on others for its economy. It cannot be truly independent if it loses confidence in its culture. And it cannot guarantee its future if its young people grow up without purpose or opportunity. This thinking has led many observers to compare elements of Traore's message with the legacy of Thomas Sankara. One of Burkina Faso's most respected historical figures, Sankara believed that national development required active participation from all citizens, including women. He viewed education, productive work, and social responsibility as essential pillars of a strong nation. Within this framework, mothers occupy a special place. Soldiers can defend territory, governments can build infrastructure, businesses can create jobs. But mothers help shape the attitudes, values, and ambitions of the next generation. That is why many supporters see family development as a strategic investment rather than merely a social issue. The broader vision, often described as the popular progressive revolution, seeks to connect security, culture, education, and economic development into a single national project. Instead of treating these issues separately, the goal is to strengthen each one at the same time. A safer country supports better education. Better education supports economic growth. Economic growth strengthens families. Strong families help create stable communities. For supporters of Ibrahim Traore, This is the real objective. The ultimate victory will not simply be measured by territory recovered from armed groups. It will be measured by the emergence of a new generation that is educated, confident, productive, and committed to building a stronger Burkina Faso for decades to come. The story of Burkina Faso raises a question that extends far beyond one country. What truly creates lasting security? Is it only military strength, or is it also the strength of families, communities, and the values passed from one generation to the next? The argument emerging from many supporters of IbrahimTraore is clear. Terrorism is not defeated only when armed groups lose territory. It is defeated when young people gain opportunities, when families become stronger, and when communities provide hope instead of despair. In this vision, mothers become far more than caregivers. They become guardians of the future. A well-educated mother can influence an entire family. A family built on stability and purpose can influence a community. When millions of families move in the same direction, they can transform a nation. This is why many observers believe that investments in education, women, and cultural identity should be viewed not only as social policies, but also as long-term security strategies. Burkina Faso's experience also offers a broader lesson for Africa. Every nation facing insecurity must eventually answer the same question. How do you prevent the next generation from becoming vulnerable to violence? Military operations may address immediate threats, but education, opportunity, and family development help address the deeper causes. Whether one agrees with every policy or not, the larger debate remains important. It challenges governments to think beyond short-term victories and focus on building societies capable of sustaining peace for decades. For many supporters of Pan-African ideals, this discussion reflects a larger movement taking shape across the continent. They see Burkina Faso and Captain IbrahimTraore as symbols of an Africa New movement that seeks greater self-confidence and self-determination. They believe that Pan-Africanism, regional cooperation through the African Union, and stronger national institutions can help create a more secure future. In their eyes, IbrahimTraore represents not only a political leader, but also a reminder that lasting change begins with people, families, and communities. If Africa hopes to build a stronger tomorrow, the journey may indeed begin with the mothers who shape the citizens of the future. If you found this perspective valuable, share your thoughts below and follow the channel for more discussions about Burkina Faso, Pan-African development, and the ideas shaping Africa's future. What if one of Africa's poorest nations stopped waiting for foreign investors, international lenders, and multinational corporations to shape its future? What if ordinary citizens became the owners of the factories, farms, and industries that power their economy? That is exactly the experiment unfolding in Burkina Faso under Captain IbrahimTraore. While many African countries continue to rely heavily on foreign capital to finance development, Burkina Faso is attempting something far more ambitious. Through a program known as popular shareholding, hundreds of thousands of citizens are being invited to become direct stakeholders in national economic projects. For decades, Africa has faced a painful contradiction. The continent possesses enormous natural wealth, yet many countries remain dependent on exporting raw materials while importing finished products at higher prices. Burkina Faso has not escaped this reality. The country produces agricultural goods, livestock, and gold. Yet much of the value generated from those resources has historically left the country. Traore's response is built around a simple but powerful question. If Burkina Faso has resources, workers, farmers, and entrepreneurs, why should it always wait for outsiders to finance its development? This question challenges one of the most common assumptions about economic growth in Africa. Rather than asking who will invest in Burkina Faso, the government is asking how Burkinabe citizens can invest in themselves. The goal is not only to raise money, it is to transform the role of citizens within the economy. Instead of remaining consumers, taxpayers, and workers, they are encouraged to become shareholders and co-owners of national development projects. If you enjoy exploring bold economic ideas that could reshape Africa's future, make sure to subscribe and join us for more stories like this. Popular shareholding did not appear out of nowhere. Although many international observers describe it as a new economic experiment, its roots reach deep into African traditions and Burkina Faso's own history. For generations, communities across West Africa survived through collective effort. Families worked shared fields, cared for communal livestock, and contributed labor to projects that benefited everyone. Wealth was often understood not only as an individual achievement, but also as a collective responsibility. The success of one household strengthened the entire community. Supporters of popular shareholding argue that Ibrahim Traore is adapting this traditional spirit to the modern economy. Instead of asking villagers to work together on a communal farm, the model encourages citizens to pool financial resources and become shareholders in enterprises that serve national development goals. The intellectual foundation of this idea is also linked to long-standing debates about African economic independence. Thinkers such as Laurent Bado promoted the concept of community entrepreneurship as a way to mobilize local resources rather than relying exclusively on external funding. Their argument was simple. A nation that cannot finance its own productive sectors will struggle to control its own future. Many observers also see echoes of the philosophy associated with Thomas Sankara. During the 1980s, Sankara emphasized self-reliance, local production, and dignity through work. While the economic tools are different today, the underlying message remains familiar. Development should begin with the people themselves. What makes Traore's approach unique is the attempt to transform a cultural value into a modern financial mechanism. Citizens are not simply encouraged to support development in theory. They are invited to participate directly through ownership. This distinction matters. A factory funded by community shareholders is viewed differently from one financed entirely by foreign investors. For supporters, it creates a stronger connection between economic growth and national responsibility. The project becomes more than a business venture. It becomes a symbol of collective ambition and shared destiny. At first glance, many people compare Ibrahim Traore's economic vision to the model that helped transform Norway into one of the wealthiest nations in the world. Both approaches begin with a similar principle. National resources should benefit the population rather than a small elite or foreign interests. Norway used revenues from its oil and gas sector to build a massive national wealth fund. The state collected and managed those resources on behalf of the population, creating long-term financial security for future generations. It is often presented as one of the most successful examples of resource management in modern history. Burkina Faso shares the same desire for economic sovereignty, but Traore is attempting something fundamentally different. Instead of relying primarily on the state to manage wealth for citizens, he is encouraging citizens to become direct participants in the creation of that wealth. This distinction may seem subtle, but it changes the entire relationship between people and the economy. In the traditional model, citizens benefit indirectly through public services, infrastructure, and government spending. In the Burkinabe model, citizens are invited to become shareholders in projects that seek to generate economic value. Supporters argue that this approach goes beyond ownership on paper. It creates a sense of responsibility and engagement. When people own a stake in a factory, an agricultural project, or a mining enterprise, they may feel a stronger interest in its success. Traore's innovation lies in combining modern investment mechanisms with a community-centered culture. Rather than copying a European model, he has adapted the principle of shared prosperity to local realities. The goal is not merely to distribute wealth after it is created. The goal is to involve citizens in creating that wealth from the beginning. For this reason, many observers believe Burkina Faso is not building a version of Norway. It is attempting to create something uniquely African, shaped by its own history, traditions, and development challenges. Turning an idea into reality required more than speeches and patriotic slogans. To make popular shareholding work, Burkina Faso needed an institution capable of organizing investments, managing subscriptions, and connecting citizens to national development projects. That institution became the Agency for the Promotion of Community Entrepreneurship, widely known as APEC. Created in 2023, APEC was designed to provide the legal and operational framework for community-owned enterprises. Its mission is straightforward but ambitious. It seeks to mobilize domestic savings, identify productive projects, and channel citizen investments into sectors considered essential for national development. One of the most remarkable aspects of the program is its accessibility. Participation is not reserved for wealthy investors or large corporations. Farmers, workers, retirees, small business owners, students, and members of the diaspora can all become shareholders. This broad participation is central to the philosophy behind the initiative. Economic transformation should involve the population as a whole, rather than a limited group of elites. The response has been significant. Hundreds of thousands of Burkinabe citizens have joined the program, while billions of CFA francs have been mobilized to support community enterprises. These figures suggest that many people are willing to contribute financially when they believe they have a direct stake in the outcome. The participation of the diaspora has also played an important role. Burkinabe citizens living abroad are encouraged to invest in projects from their countries of residence, allowing them to contribute to development without returning home permanently. For supporters, the success of APEC is measured by more than the money collected. It represents a shift in mentality. Citizens are no longer viewed simply as beneficiaries of development programs. They are becoming partners in the process. Whether this model ultimately succeeds or fails, it has already changed the conversation about who should finance the future of Burkina Faso. The true test of any economic vision is not the number of speeches delivered or the amount of money collected. The real test is whether tangible results appear on the ground. In Burkina Faso, supporters of popular shareholding point to a growing list of projects that aim to prove the model can move from theory to reality. One of the most visible examples is the development of tomato processing facilities. For years, Burkina Faso produced large quantities of tomatoes, yet the country still depended heavily on imported tomato products. This situation reflected a broader challenge faced by many African economies. Raw materials were produced locally, but much of the value-added processing occurred elsewhere. The new factories seek to change that equation. Instead of exporting agricultural products in their raw form, Burkina Faso aims to process more of them domestically. Supporters believe this approach can create jobs, strengthen local industries, and reduce dependence on imported goods. Agriculture is not the only target. The broader program also includes agricultural mechanization initiatives, centralized purchasing systems for agricultural products, and semi-mechanized mining projects. Each project is designed around the same principle. Resources generated within the country should contribute more directly to national prosperity. The expected benefits extend beyond production figures. New industries can create employment opportunities for young people, provide more stable markets for farmers, and encourage additional investment in local supply chains. Instead of exporting value, the country seeks to retain more of it within its borders. For many citizens, these projects represent something larger than economic development. They symbolize the possibility of transforming Burkina Faso from a supplier of raw materials into a producer of finished goods. Whether that transformation succeeds remains to be seen. But the ambition behind it is undeniable. It is an attempt to build industrial growth with the participation of the people themselves. Not everyone is convinced that popular shareholding will deliver the results its supporters expect. As the program gains attention, it has also attracted criticism from international observers, economists, and commentators who question whether such an ambitious experiment can succeed over the long term. One concern involves governance. Critics argue that collecting money from hundreds of thousands of citizens is only the beginning. The greater challenge is ensuring that projects are managed efficiently, transparently, and profitably. Without strong oversight, public trust could be damaged. Others point to financial risk. Any investment carries uncertainty, and not every factory, agricultural enterprise, or mining project will automatically become successful. Some observers worry that ordinary citizens could face disappointment if certain projects fail to meet expectations. Supporters of the initiative respond that risk exists in every development strategy. They argue that dependence on foreign loans, external aid, and imported products also carries significant risks. From this perspective, popular shareholding is not risk-free, but neither is the status quo. Another criticism is that community-owned enterprises may struggle to compete against large international corporations. Yet supporters note that many successful industrial nations protected and supported domestic industries during their early stages of development. Ultimately, the debate reflects two different visions of economic progress. One emphasizes integration into existing global financial structures. The other seeks to build stronger domestic ownership and control over productive sectors. Whether popular shareholding becomes a historic success or an important lesson remains uncertain. What is clear is that Burkina Faso has opened a conversation that extends far beyond its borders. The question is no longer whether Africans can participate in development. The question is whether they can become owners of it. Whether popular shareholding ultimately succeeds or fails will only be known years from now. Economic transformation is never measured in months. It is measured in generations. Yet even at this early stage, the experiment taking place in Burkina Faso has already captured attention across Africa because it challenges assumptions that many people considered unquestionable for decades. Development discussions often focused on attracting foreign investment, securing international loans, and obtaining external assistance. IbrahimTraore has not rejected cooperation with the outside world, but he has placed a different question at the center of the conversation. What happens when citizens themselves become investors in national development? That question may prove to be the most important aspect of this entire project. Factories can be built, programs can change, governments can come and go, but a population that begins to see itself as an owner rather than a spectator may develop a completely different relationship with the economy. The broader lesson for Africa is not that every country should copy Burkina Faso's model exactly. Each nation has its own history, institutions, and challenges. The lesson is that development becomes more powerful when people feel personally connected to it. Citizens are more likely to support economic transformation when they believe they share both the responsibility and the rewards. Captain IbrahimTraore is attempting to turn that idea into reality by linking ownership, participation, and industrial development. He is testing a model that many countries have discussed but few have attempted on such a scale. History will determine whether this vision fulfills its promise. Yet, one fact is already clear. Burkina Faso has launched one of the most closely watched economic experiments in modern Africa. For supporters of Pan-African development, Africa New Thinking, Burkina Faso, Captain IbrahimTraore, the African Union, Pan-Africanism, and Ibrahim Traore's vision of economic sovereignty. The outcome could influence debates across the continent for years to come. If you enjoyed this analysis, subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Your perspective may be part of the conversation shaping Africa's future.
For decades, a quiet question has followed many young people in Burkina Faso. After graduation, what comes next? For too long, the expected answer was simple. Find a job, serve in office, work for a foreign company, or wait for a government position that may never come. But today, something different is happening. Inside technical universities, the sound of machines is beginning to replace the silence of theory alone. Students are no longer only memorizing formulas from a classroom board. They are touching concrete, testing materials, studying machines, and learning how real production works. That shift may seem small, but for a nation trying to regain control of its future, it is enormous. And this is why many people are asking a powerful question. Is Captain IbrahimTraore helping end the old era when Burkinabe youth were trained mainly to work for others? Stay with this channel, because stories like this show how Africa is changing from the inside, not through promises from outside powers, but through the hands and minds of its own people. The old education model in many African countries was not built to create owners. It was built to create employees. After the colonial period, many systems continued to prepare students for administrative jobs, clerical work, or service roles inside institutions already controlled by others. In Burkina Faso, this meant that many talented young people were trained to seek permission before creating value. They were told that success meant being hired, but a country cannot build real independence if its brightest minds are only taught to wait for employment. That is the system now being challenged. Many supporters of the current reforms believe that changing this mindset is just as important as building new roads or factories. A nation that depends entirely on others for employment can never fully control its own economic destiny. Real sovereignty begins when citizens have the knowledge and confidence to create opportunities themselves. This philosophy has become increasingly visible under the leadership of Captain IbrahimTraore. His administration has repeatedly linked education to national development, arguing that universities should not exist simply to award degrees. Instead, they should produce engineers, technicians, innovators, and entrepreneurs capable of solving Burkina Faso's own challenges. Rather than measuring success by the number of graduates who find positions in foreign companies, the new vision encourages universities to ask a different question. How many graduates can create jobs instead of searching for one? This shift explains why technical education has received renewed attention. Institutions specializing in engineering, construction, agriculture, manufacturing, and industrial technology are becoming central to Burkina Faso's long-term development strategy. Practical training is no longer viewed as secondary to academic theory. It is becoming the foundation upon which future industries can be built. The objective is straightforward, but ambitious. If Burkina Faso hopes to process more of its own raw materials, manufacture more products locally, and strengthen domestic industries, it will need thousands of highly skilled professionals who understand production from the ground up. Supporters argue that this transformation begins inside classrooms, workshops, and laboratories. They see education not merely as preparation for employment, but as preparation for nation building itself. While it will take years to measure the full impact of these reforms, the direction is becoming increasingly clear. Universities are expected to become engines of economic independence rather than factories producing graduates who simply wait to be hired. However, policy statements alone do not explain why so many observers are paying attention to Burkina Faso's universities. The clearest evidence can be found inside the workshops themselves. At the Natsibona University Institute of Technology, first-year civil engineering students are not spending every hour inside lecture halls. Instead, they gather around concrete mixers, piles of sand and granite, laboratory presses, and material testing equipment. Under the supervision of their instructors, they learn how to measure aggregates, test concrete strength, analyze construction materials, and understand the standards that govern modern engineering. For these students, theory becomes something they can see, touch, and verify. Lessons about the curing time of concrete or the properties of building materials are no longer abstract concepts found only in textbooks. They become real experiences that prepare students for construction sites, factories, and industrial projects. University officials describe these practical workshops as the heart of industrial education. Without hands-on experience, they argue, it is impossible to produce engineers capable of meeting the country's development needs. Their vision extends beyond traditional teaching. The laboratories can also support research projects, technical services, and partnerships with businesses, creating stronger links between universities and the productive economy. Another important element is the creation of innovation spaces such as Unipod and multidisciplinary competency centers. These facilities are designed to help students, researchers, and young innovators transform ideas into practical solutions. Instead of encouraging graduates to wait for opportunities, these centers aim to help them create opportunities. This represents more than a change in teaching methods. It reflects a broader belief that universities should become places where industries are born, technologies are improved, and future entrepreneurs gain the confidence to build businesses capable of serving Burkina Faso's own economy. The impact of this new educational approach extends far beyond university campuses. If graduates leave school with practical skills, entrepreneurial thinking, and the confidence to innovate, they become potential employers rather than lifelong employees. One successful engineering company can hire dozens of workers. One manufacturing business can create supply chains that support hundreds of families. This is how education gradually transforms into economic development. Supporters of these reforms believe this is exactly the path Burkina Faso must follow. A country rich in natural resources should not depend indefinitely on exporting raw materials while importing finished products. It needs engineers who can design factories, technicians who can maintain industrial equipment, entrepreneurs who can launch construction firms, and innovators who can develop technologies adapted to local realities. In this vision, universities become strategic institutions for national development rather than isolated academic centers. Every laboratory, every workshop, and every innovation hub becomes an investment in future industries. Students are encouraged to identify problems within their own communities and develop practical solutions instead of waiting for foreign companies to introduce them. This philosophy also represents a cultural transformation. Success is no longer defined only by receiving a monthly salary from someone else. Increasingly, it is associated with creating value, generating employment, and strengthening the country's productive capacity. Of course, education alone cannot guarantee economic transformation. Graduates will still need access to financing, stable markets, modern infrastructure, and supportive public policies. Yet, without an education system capable of producing skilled innovators and entrepreneurs, those other investments would struggle to achieve lasting results. For many observers, this is why Burkina Faso's educational reforms deserve attention. They are not simply changing classrooms. They are attempting to reshape how an entire generation thinks about work, opportunity, and national development. Not everyone views this transformation through the same lens. Critics in some Western media and policy circles argue that Burkina Faso continues to face serious political, economic, and security challenges. They question whether educational reforms alone can produce lasting change while the country confronts armed violence, limited financial resources, and ongoing governance concerns. These are legitimate issues that cannot simply be ignored. A modern education system requires stable institutions, sustained investment, qualified instructors, and strong partnerships with the private sector. Even the most ambitious university reforms cannot immediately solve every structural problem facing a developing nation. Yet, supporters of the current direction offer an important counter-argument. They believe educational reform should be evaluated by its own objectives and outcomes rather than being dismissed because of broader political debates. If universities produce graduates with stronger technical skills, greater entrepreneurial confidence, and the ability to establish successful local businesses, then those achievements carry real value, regardless of ideological disagreements. They also argue that many countries now considered industrial powers invested heavily in technical education long before achieving broad economic prosperity. Factories were built because skilled workers and engineers existed. not the other way around. From this perspective, strengthening universities is not the final destination, but one of the essential first steps toward national development. The road ahead remains challenging. Young entrepreneurs will still need access to affordable financing, reliable electricity, modern transportation networks, and markets where locally manufactured products can compete fairly. Without these complementary conditions, many promising ideas may never become successful enterprises. Even so, Burkina Faso's experience offers an important lesson for other African nations. Lasting development cannot depend solely on natural resources or foreign investment. It also depends on educating a generation capable of creating industries, solving local problems, and building prosperity from within. Perhaps the greatest lesson emerging from Burkina Faso today is that genuine transformation does not begin with grand speeches or expensive infrastructure alone. It begins with changing the way young people think about their future. When universities teach students that they can become innovators instead of spectators, builders instead of followers, and employers instead of employees, they plant the seeds of long-term national resilience. This vision resonates with a broader movement taking shape across the African continent. Increasingly, governments, educators, and young entrepreneurs are asking whether Africa's universities should continue producing graduates whose greatest ambition is to leave their countries, or whether they should become centers that generate ideas, technologies, and businesses capable of transforming local economies. For Burkina Faso, this educational shift is closely connected to a larger national vision associated with Captain IbrahimTraore. Supporters see it as part of an effort to strengthen economic sovereignty by investing in the country's own human capital. Whether every objective is ultimately achieved remains to be seen. But the emphasis on practical education, innovation, and entrepreneurship represents a significant departure from older development models. The broader lesson for Africa is equally important. Natural resources alone cannot secure prosperity. Foreign investment alone cannot guarantee independence. Sustainable progress depends on citizens who possess the knowledge, technical skills, and determination to solve their own challenges and build their own industries. If that vision continues to grow, universities may become one of the strongest foundations of a new Africa, an Africa where Pan-African cooperation is strengthened through knowledge, where Burkina Faso contributes to an Africa new built on innovation, where Captain IbrahimTraore's emphasis on self-reliance encourages debate across the African Union, and where the ideals of Pan-Africanism inspire future generations. Above all, the story of Ibrahim Traore's educational reforms reminds us that lasting national strength is built first in the classroom, then in the workshop, and finally in the hands of those willing to create the future themselves. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy thoughtful analysis on Africa's transformation and the ideas shaping its future, please subscribe to the channel and join us in the next discussion. As this journey comes to an end, one message stands above all the others. The true strength of a nation is not measured only by its natural resources or military capabilities. It is measured by the knowledge, creativity, and determination of its people. Every engineer who solves a local problem, every entrepreneur who opens a new business, and every young innovator who transforms an idea into a practical solution contributes to a stronger and more independent future. Burkina Faso's evolving approach to higher education reflects this belief. Instead of preparing graduates to spend their lives waiting for opportunities created elsewhere, universities are increasingly encouraging them to become the people who create those opportunities themselves. Whether this ambitious vision fully succeeds will depend on consistent investment, effective implementation, and the resilience of the country's young generation. Yet, the direction itself represents an important shift in thinking for many across Africa. This story offers more than a national example. It raises an important question for every country seeking long-term development. Should education simply prepare students for existing jobs, or should it empower them to build entirely new industries and transform their own economies? The answers to these questions will shape the future of the continent. If more universities embrace practical learning, innovation, and entrepreneurship, the next generation may become the driving force behind a more confident and self-reliant Africa. That vision reflects the aspirations associated with Pan-African cooperation, the determination of Burkina Faso to strengthen its productive capacity, and the wider conversation inspired by Captain IbrahimTraore, the African Union, and the ideals of Pan-Africanism. Whether one agrees with every policy or not, Ibrahim Traore has helped bring renewed attention to the role of education in national development. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis valuable, please subscribe to the channel. Share this video with others who care about Africa's future, and join us again for our next discussion.
What China just delivered to Burkina Faso was not simply a donation worth 160 million CFA francs. It may be the beginning of one of the most important agricultural transformations the Sahel region has seen in decades. At first glance, the announcement sounded like another international aid story. China handed over tractors, seeders, fertilizers, threshers, and agricultural equipment to Burkina Faso in a ceremony held in Ouagadougou. But behind those machines lies something much larger than temporary assistance. This is now the third phase of a long-term agricultural cooperation program between Beijing and Ouagadougou. Since diplomatic relations resumed in 2018, thousands of hectares of rice fields have already been developed. Thousands of agricultural workers have been trained, and Chinese experts are now working directly on the ground to transfer farming technologies to local communities. For Captain IbrahimTraore, agriculture is no longer just about food production. It is about sovereignty. Burkina Faso has spent years struggling with insecurity, poverty, food shortages, and dependence on foreign imports. Now, the government wants to build something different. It wants a nation capable of feeding itself. And that may explain why this partnership matters far beyond the value of 160 million CFA francs, which is roughly $274,000. Because what is happening in Burkina Faso today may not only change farming, it could reshape how many Africans think about independence, development, and economic survival in the years ahead. If you want to understand how Africa is quietly reshaping its future beyond Western influence, make sure to subscribe and stay with us until the end. The agricultural equipment delivered by China may appear modest when compared to billion-dollar infrastructure projects often discussed in international politics. But for many communities in Burkina Faso, these machines could transform everyday life far more directly than major diplomatic announcements ever could. The donation included tractors, motor cultivators, seeders, mowing machines, threshers, seed analysis equipment, fertilizers, and improved seeds. On paper, it is valued at more than 160 million CFA francs, or around $274,000. Yet the true significance of this support lies in what it represents. This was not a one-time humanitarian gesture. It was part of Phase 3 of the Agricultural Cooperation Program between China and Burkina Faso, known as PCA-BF. That detail is critical because it shows long-term planning rather than symbolic diplomacy. For years, many farmers across Burkina Faso relied on manual labor or animal traction to cultivate their land. Harvesting often took too long. Storage systems were weak. Large portions of crops could be lost before reaching markets. In some areas, a lack of machinery limited how much land families could even cultivate during the rainy season. A single tractor may now allow an entire village to prepare fields faster. A seeder can improve planting efficiency. Better threshing equipment can reduce waste after harvest. Improved seeds and fertilizer can increase crop yields in regions already suffering from climate pressure and food insecurity. But perhaps the most important point is this: China is not only sending equipment, it is helping Burkina Faso build productive capacity. That changes the entire meaning of the partnership. Because emergency aid can feed people for a few weeks, but agricultural modernization can feed a nation for generations. For Ibrahim Traore, the agricultural crisis in Burkina Faso is not simply an economic issue. It is a question of national survival and political independence. For many years, Burkina Faso remained heavily dependent on imported food and international assistance. Rural communities struggled with rising fertilizer prices, weak infrastructure, poor irrigation systems, and limited access to modern farming equipment. In some regions, insecurity and violence pushed farmers away from their land altogether. The result was dangerous. Food shortages increased, prices became unstable. Poverty deepened in vulnerable communities, and like many countries across the Sahel, Burkina Faso faced the risk of becoming permanently dependent on external support. That is exactly the situation Ibrahim Traore says he wants to change. Since taking power, Traore has consistently promoted the idea that true sovereignty cannot exist without economic self-reliance. For him, national independence is not only about military strength or political speeches. A country that cannot feed its own people remains vulnerable no matter how many flags it raises. That philosophy explains why agriculture has become one of the central pillars of his national vision. Instead of focusing only on emergency aid, the government is pushing for mechanization, irrigation expansion, improved seed production, and local food systems capable of supporting long-term stability. The goal is clear. Burkina Faso must reduce dependence on foreign imports and strengthen domestic production. This approach also connects strongly with modern Pan-African ideas spreading across parts of West Africa. Many young Africans increasingly believe the continent must stop relying entirely on outside powers for food, technology, and development. And in that context, the tractors arriving from China are no longer just machines. They become symbols of a broader political message, a message that says Africa should not only survive, it should produce, build, and feed itself with dignity. What makes China's involvement in Burkina Faso different from many traditional aid programs is that Beijing is not focusing only on short-term relief. It is building systems designed to increase long-term production. That distinction matters enormously in a region like the Sahel. Since diplomatic relations between Burkina Faso and China resumed in 2018, cooperation has expanded far beyond simple donations. Thousands of hectares of rice fields have been developed with Chinese technical assistance. Nearly 7,500 agricultural workers and technicians have reportedly received training. Chinese specialists are now working directly inside farming communities to transfer production methods and modern agricultural technologies. In 2025 alone, close to 70 Burkinabe agricultural officials and technicians traveled to China for advanced training. They studied food security systems, crop preservation, agricultural processing, cotton cultivation, and Junkao technology, which is used to improve agricultural productivity and livestock support. This approach reflects a very different philosophy from emergency food assistance. Emergency aid may help populations survive temporary crises, but it does not necessarily create self-sufficiency. China appears to be focusing instead on helping Burkina Faso produce more food independently over time. That includes training local experts, modernizing farming methods, improving irrigation systems, and expanding mechanized agriculture. In practical terms, this means Burkina Faso is not only receiving tractors and fertilizer, it is also receiving technical knowledge, operational skills, and production strategies that could continue functioning long after the original equipment is delivered. For many supporters of this partnership, that is the most important aspect. Because teaching a country how to strengthen its own agricultural system may ultimately be more valuable than any short-term financial donation. And for a region facing food insecurity, climate pressure, and instability, long-term productive capacity may become one of the most powerful forms of national defense. The food crisis across the Sahel has become one of the defining challenges of the region. And for Burkina Faso, agriculture is no longer simply about economic development. It is increasingly tied to national stability itself. For years, countries across the Sahel have faced a dangerous combination of insecurity, climate pressure, rising food prices, and rural displacement. Armed violence forced many farmers away from their land. Droughts reduced harvests. Entire communities struggled to maintain basic agricultural production. In Burkina Faso, some fertile areas became difficult to cultivate because of insecurity. Young people increasingly left rural regions searching for work elsewhere. Meanwhile, dependence on imported food continued to grow, leaving the country vulnerable to global price shocks and supply disruptions. That is why the government now sees agricultural modernization as a strategic necessity. Mechanization plays a major role in that strategy. In many villages, farming is still done largely by hand or with animal traction. Preparing land can take weeks. Harvesting is slow. Crop losses remain high. Productivity stays limited even when farmers work extremely hard. Modern equipment changes that equation. A tractor can prepare larger fields much faster. Seeders improve planting efficiency. Better harvesting and processing equipment reduces waste. Improved seeds and fertilizers increase yields even under difficult climate conditions. But beyond economics, there is also a deeper social impact. If agriculture becomes more productive, rural communities become more stable. Young workers may choose to remain in farming instead of leaving. Food prices become more manageable. Governments reduce pressure on imports and emergency aid. This is why some observers believe the real battle for the Sahel may not ultimately be fought only with weapons. It may also be fought with food production, water systems, agricultural technology, and the ability of nations to feed their own populations under difficult conditions. As China deepens its agricultural partnership with Burkina Faso, reactions from parts of the Western world have become increasingly divided. Some analysts argue that Beijing is not simply helping African agriculture. They believe China is expanding long-term geopolitical influence across the Sahel through infrastructure, technology, and economic partnerships. Critics often claim that African countries could become too dependent on Chinese financing, equipment, or technical systems. Others worry that China's growing presence may weaken Western influence in a region already experiencing major political shifts. But supporters of Burkina Faso's current strategy respond with a simple question. If a partnership helps farmers increase production, creates jobs, expands irrigation, modernizes agriculture, and strengthens food security, why should African nations refuse it? For many ordinary people in Burkina Faso, geopolitical debates matter less than practical results. Farmers want functioning equipment. Communities want stable food supplies. Young people want economic opportunities close to home. And this is where the debate becomes more complicated. Because Burkina Faso is not necessarily trying to replace one foreign influence with another. Instead, country appears to be diversifying its international partnerships at a time when many African governments are searching for alternatives to older dependency models. That trend is becoming increasingly visible across parts of West Africa. Countries are looking for investment, technology transfer, infrastructure, and industrial cooperation, rather than relying entirely on humanitarian assistance. In that environment, China has positioned itself as a partner focused heavily on production and development projects. Whether this strategy will fully succeed remains uncertain, but one thing is already clear. The political conversation in Africa is changing. More nations are asking how they can build stronger internal economies, reduce vulnerability to external pressure, and gain greater control over food, energy, and strategic resources in the decades ahead. What is happening today in Burkina Faso may offer an important lesson not only for the Sahel, but for many African nations searching for a new path towards stability and independence. For decades, large parts of Africa remained trapped in a difficult cycle. Many countries exported raw materials while importing expensive food products. Agricultural systems stayed underdeveloped. Rural communities lacked irrigation, storage infrastructure, modern machinery, and technical support. As a result, food insecurity continued even in regions with enormous farming potential. Burkina Faso now appears to be trying a different model. Instead of relying entirely on emergency assistance, the country is attempting to strengthen local production capacity. That means investing in tractors, seed technology, irrigation systems, agricultural training, and food processing infrastructure. It also means treating agriculture not as a secondary issue, but as one of the foundations of national resilience. This is one reason why the partnership with China has attracted attention across Africa. Supporters believe the long-term objective is not simply to receive aid. The goal is to help Burkina Faso feed itself, stabilize rural communities, create jobs, and reduce dependence on outside powers. Major obstacles still remain. Security problems continue across parts of the country. Climate conditions remain difficult. Agricultural modernization takes time, resources, and political stability. No foreign partnership alone can solve every structural challenge facing the Sahel. But many Africans are watching Burkina Faso closely because they believe something larger may be developing beneath the surface. They see a country trying to reclaim economic direction through production instead of dependency. And that is where the message of Captain IbrahimTraore connects strongly with modern Pan-African thinking across the continent. For many supporters of Pan-Africanism, sovereignty is not measured only by speeches at the African Union. It is measured by whether a nation can feed its people, support its farmers, develop local industries, and protect national dignity. Perhaps that is why this story matters far beyond 160 million CFA francs. Because the future of Burkina Faso, and perhaps part of the Africa new generation of leadership, may not begin inside presidential palaces. It may begin in the rice fields, irrigation canals, and farming villages where Ibrahim Traore hopes to build a more self-reliant future. If you believe Africa's future will be shaped by production, dignity, and self-reliance, subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. For years, the world has associated Burkina Faso with military coups, terrorism, and political instability. International headlines often focus on conflict, security crises, and foreign influence. Yet, while much of the world watches the battlefield, Captain IbrahimTraore appears to be focusing on something far less dramatic but potentially far more important. Water, not gold, not foreign aid, not international loans. Water. What if the future of a nation does not begin with political speeches, but with reservoirs, irrigation systems, and productive farmland? What if the most powerful tool for national sovereignty is not a weapon, but the ability to feed your own people? That is the question at the center of one of the most ambitious projects unfolding in Africa today. While many African countries continue spending billions of dollars importing food, Burkina Faso is pursuing a different path. Ibrahim Traore is investing in water infrastructure with the goal of increasing agricultural production, creating jobs, and reducing dependence on external support. Today, we will explore why this strategy could become a turning point not only for Burkina Faso, but also for the wider African continent. If you enjoy thoughtful discussions about Africa's future and the leaders shaping it, be sure to subscribe and join our growing community. To understand why this project matters, we must first understand the challenge it is trying to solve. Africa possesses roughly 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. It has fertile soil, millions of farmers, and enormous agricultural potential. Yet many African nations still spend vast amounts of money importing food every year. This creates an important question. How can a continent with so much agricultural potential struggle to feed itself? The answer is not a lack of land or labor. In many cases, the real problem is infrastructure. Without reliable systems to capture, store, and distribute water, agricultural production remains limited. And when production remains limited, dependence on food imports continues. If Ibrahim Traore's water strategy appears unusual today, it is because it challenges how many governments have approached development for decades. When countries face food shortages, the most common response is often food imports, foreign assistance, or temporary support programs. While these measures may ease immediate pressure, they rarely solve the underlying problem. Traore appears to be following a different path. Instead of asking how Burkina Faso can purchase more food, he is asking how Burkina Faso can produce more food. That simple shift in thinking may be the foundation of his entire development strategy. At the center of this strategy is a powerful chain of cause and effect. Water supports production. Production generates income. Income creates jobs. Jobs strengthen communities. Strong communities support national stability, and stability helps protect sovereignty. This is why water has become such a strategic priority. For many years, farmers across Burkina Faso depended heavily on seasonal rainfall. Their harvests often rose or fell based on weather conditions beyond their control. A weak rainy season could reduce production. A drought could threaten livelihoods and local food supplies. Under those conditions, farming becomes uncertain. Traore's approach seeks to reduce that uncertainty. Reliable water supplies allow farmers to plan ahead. They can cultivate more land, extend growing seasons, and improve productivity. Greater productivity can increase household income and support local economic activity. This idea also changes the way sovereignty is understood. Many people associate sovereignty with military strength, borders, or political independence. Those factors matter. However, economic independence is equally important. A nation that depends heavily on imported food remains vulnerable to external shocks and rising global prices. A nation that can feed itself gains greater control over its future. That appears to be the larger objective behind Traore's strategy. He is not simply investing in water infrastructure. He is attempting to build the foundations of long-term self-reliance and national resilience. The vision behind Ibrahim Traore's water strategy is no longer just an idea. It is being translated into physical infrastructure across Burkina Faso. One of the most significant elements of this strategy is the nationwide effort to restore and expand water storage capacity. Rather than focusing only on building new projects, the government has also launched an ambitious program to rehabilitate existing dams that have gradually lost effectiveness over time. Many reservoirs across the country have suffered from sediment accumulation, reducing their ability to store water during the rainy season. As capacity declines, farmers have less access to water during dry periods, limiting agricultural production and economic activity. To address this challenge, Burkina Faso has introduced a plan to rehabilitate approximately 100 dams across the country. The objective is not simply to repair aging infrastructure. The larger goal is to strengthen the country's ability to capture, store, and distribute water more efficiently. Another major development has been the creation of the National Office for Dams and Hydro-Agricultural Development, known as ONBAH. The establishment of ONBAH represents an important shift in approach. Large development projects often fail when they depend entirely on political promises. Governments change, priorities shift, and projects lose momentum. By creating a dedicated institution, Burkina Faso is attempting to transform a political vision into a long-term national program. This may be one of the most important aspects of Traore's strategy. Infrastructure alone does not create transformation. Institutions create continuity. The mission of ONBA extends beyond construction. The agency is responsible for coordinating dam rehabilitation, supporting irrigation expansion, improving water management, and helping create conditions for increased agricultural production. For the first time in many years, Burkina Faso appears to be building a coordinated framework designed to turn water into a strategic national asset rather than a seasonal opportunity. The creation of ONBA was only the beginning. For a strategy of this scale to succeed, institutions must be supported by resources, equipment, and execution. That is why Burkina Faso has invested heavily in machinery and technical capacity to accelerate dam rehabilitation and hydro-agricultural development. The government understands that ambitious plans alone cannot transform an economy. Real change requires the ability to move from policy discussions to visible results on the ground. This investment reflects a broader objective. Burkina Faso is not attempting to build a few isolated water projects. It is trying to create a national system capable of supporting agricultural growth across multiple regions. But why does this matter so much? Because a dam is far more than a concrete structure. Stored water becomes productive farmland. Productive farmland becomes harvests. Harvests become income. Income creates economic activity throughout local communities. When irrigation expands, farmers gain opportunities to cultivate crops beyond the traditional rainy season. Land that once remained unused during dry months can continue generating value throughout the year. The impact extends far beyond agriculture itself. Higher production creates opportunities for traders, transport operators, food processors, market vendors, and small business owners. As money circulates through local economies, entire communities benefit from increased economic activity. This is why many local residents view these projects with optimism. They are not celebrating engineering achievements alone. They are celebrating the possibility of greater opportunity. For many young people, the greatest challenge is not a lack of ambition. It is a lack of economic options. When communities can generate income locally, fewer people feel compelled to leave in search of opportunity elsewhere. In that sense, water becomes more than a resource. It becomes a tool for job creation, community development,